Guy, I suffer from idea surplus disorder. I think many of us in the room have that same affliction. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the decline of the machines, otherwise what the Unabomber can teach us about legal learning. So one of my favorite things about coming to Tech Show is I get a chance to give this presentation. And so we're talking a lot about disruption tonight. We're spending lots of time thinking about all these terribly disruptive technologies. And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about disruption as well. I wanted to think a little bit about what we can do in this room to change how law works. We've already heard that LegalZoom is going to eat all our lunch. I assume that it's going to become self-aware around 2015, change its name to Skynet, and ultimately will put us all out of business. So we have a very short time frame in which to think about ways to be better at what we do. And there's no better way to get better at what we do than help lawyers get better at serving clients. And so what I want to talk a little bit about is about disrupting CLE. There are no shortage of people in this room who have given a CLE in the last 3 months. We have people in this room who are regulators, people who are journalists, people who give presentations for a living, and people who ultimately do this on a fairly regular basis. I want to think back to my first CLE roughly 20 years ago. I was just out of law school, and CLE was something that you did to get better. In Illinois at the time, it wasn't mandatory. In fact, for lots of us, our first CLE, if we close our eyes and think about it for a moment, can probably be drawn in 4 circles, 3 rectangles, and a hail of bullet points. Quick, close your eyes. Think about your first CLE. What did it look like? What did it feel like? My guess is it felt something and looked something like this. Now, this was 20 years ago for me, right? 3 people on a panel, 1 person at the podium, and really bad PowerPoint. That is also, for many people, CLE today. We have not changed very much at all what CLE looks like or feels like, especially that CLE in person. Now, for a long time, it didn't matter. Continuing legal education, the place that you went was the only place you could go for current curated content that ultimately was the only place you could find out what people were thinking, what they cared about, and be the first person on your block to know what was happening. Now the problem is there is everywhere. We're also stuck with this attendance-based metric that drives CLE, which has no regard for the relevance of the content to the attendee, the competence of the presenter, or ultimately even the experience of the folks who are in the room. Think about that. We're driving CLE in this state ultimately because you are there in the room and that's it. MCLE might as well stand for mostly credits learning excluded. And if you're in a CLE room, the last month of the reporting period, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Boy, I never thought I was going to do patent law, but that's the only thing I can fit in my schedule. I need those 3 credits before we go. And so I was thinking about this. There is no lack of innovation in electronic CLE. Distance learning, spoken by another term. There's been a ton of change and innovation in what's happened on how we can ultimately consume this content using mobile devices. But there's been very little innovation in person. And a lot of that is because technology is driving us in this possibility of having our in-person experiences oftentimes shackled by our capacity to broadcast them online. Technology does not make everything better. And it certainly does not make better in-person CLE, at least not normally. What's a Wi-Fi password? Everyone wanted to know it. Did you want to know it because you wanted to tweet? Or did you want to know it because you had emails to answer? Think about this. In an attendance-based system, what do you get when technology goes up? You get more other work done. You don't necessarily get the other kinds of things that happen. Certainly the serendipitous experiences, the chance meetings, the conversations you'd have with someone next to you start to disappear as you're focusing in person on the device in front of you instead of the people around you. So this is my little bias. I think some things are better in person, learning being one of those things. So how do we make CLE better? Ask this question: what won't technology do? Not what can't technology do, because that's changing. Every day technology can do more and more and more things. But what won't it do? What won't technology allow us to do? And one of the things we should do is start asking ourselves the question: What if I designed this CLE, this conference, this experience, as if the people in the room were the only people? Instead of saying, man, you've got to stay on stage so we can video it, so we can ultimately sell it to people later on so they can look at it on their iPhones and their iPads, what if the people in the room were the most important people? Stop throttling the in-person experience to create technology-friendly, multimodal content. By the way, you'll never see more words than that from me on a slide ever again. We are finding ourselves saying it's got to be used in multiple ways. So let's forget about the people in the room who got in their car, who pay the money, and who attended. Round in the tables. When you're facing one another, different things happen than when you're ultimately shoulder to shoulder, facing forward, looking at someone, not unlike this experience right now, looking at someone on stage reading their PowerPoints. Flip the classroom. This is happening all the time now in academics. Flipping the classroom means sending people to watch the lecture on their mobile devices, to watch the lecture at home, and when you come into the classroom, do your homework together. Think about how you solve problems with the people in the room with your peers, and watch the lecture on your iPod when you're ultimately playing your game. Increase conversation. Increase hallway time. Build those chance meetings and focus less and less on technology. I know that's anathema to the people in this room. And add beer and wine, but only to a certain point. If you do these things, my hope is that MCLE will begin to stand for multi-faceted, collaborative learning experience. The people in the room are the right people to make that happen. Next time you're at an event, next time you plan an event, think about how do we make it better for the people who are there, and they will appreciate it, they'll learn more, and they'll ultimately serve their clients better. So thank you.